Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be talking about PC or player character art. Not a whole lot out there. If you've noticed on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, for example, you have a lot of these tokens, but they really don't encompass all the different aspects of Fantasy Grounds any longer because they are simply just pogs or top down. So what I'm trying to do is to emulate having a full image, the portrait art, the token art, and the 2.5 or 3D view, and that they would match. So that's kind of a challenge in the current state. Even with AI tools, it's very difficult to do. So I'm going to be using Ideogram AI. This is a paid subscription that I paid for. I don't really necessarily promote or necessarily encourage anyone to use it. I'm using it for my own self, but I'm going to create character art for an upcoming tutorial game that I want to run. So I'm just going to go down the archetypes for whatever rule set you have. In this case, I'm using 5e. So the 5e rule set has all these different archetypes. So I might start from the top and work my way down, or start from the bottom, work my way up. So if I click on wizard, these are the different wizard types that I'm going to create. Maybe one of each, male, female, maybe elf, whatever. But what I'm going to do is, instead of building a character and then putting the art on the character, I'm going to build the artwork first and then build the character around the artwork. That way it kind of matches, and I'm not trying to force. I'm just kind of being more creative, kind of spontaneous, and not getting all stressed out that the character art doesn't match the character or vice versa. So I'm just going to start with an illusionist and work my way up the list. And I'm just going to create the main art, but I'll also go through making the 3D art and the pogs, and then also the portrait. So what I was hoping to do is maybe create a set of different archetypes. So maybe I'll do wizards first and just work down the list, and then do like a group of each type, and then maybe a couple variations of each one, like male, female, or elf, dwarf, something like that. But hopefully this would be helpful for people who don't have the time nor the know-how to create their own character art. And honestly, I wish I could commission somebody to do these, but this would take a long time. It would cost me probably $500 to $1,000 to do 6 characters, depending on the artist. And the time frame, it might take a month up to a year, depending on who I commission. So it's not really conducive to starting a campaign unless you're going to plan 2 years ahead of time. So I tend to use AI for my own homebrew stuff. Now, if I was going to sell this, through a third-party vendor like maybe Kobold Press or someone like that, I probably wouldn't use AI work. But on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, we are allowed to use AI work as long as we mention that in the description. So that's one thing that I will do, or make sure I mention the AI tools were used to create the content. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start with an illusionist. So as we are looking at right now, this is basically my template that I use for creating these characters. And now you can see some of these are really goofy looking, but there are a couple good ones that come out of this. So what I want to do is kind of give you an idea of how I'm coming about this first. So just as like the full color artwork first. And I'd want to create something that's going to be interesting, so more of a player character as opposed to NPCs, because you could find plenty of those. So I'm just going to click on this particular instance, and I'm going to borrow the prompt. So this is a full body length digital fantasy illustration image of an ominous, evil, and unholy knight. So what I'm going to do is put mysterious. I'll say strange, mysterious, and powerful illusionist. Wizard. And that's going to be my start. I'm going to assume it's a male, so he has, I'll say, maybe dark gray. dark gray robes, because I think an illusionist would kind of want to stay kind of a low profile. I don't think they would want to stand out. And maybe he has a dark gray hooded. Let's say no. He has dark gray arcane or hooded arcane robes. I do want him to be hooded. Some cases I don't. I'll say a black cape. And I'll say black leather boots. Now, if you don't tell it that you want to basically to show the feet, it will try to render this thing at 3/4 of length. So that's why I'm mentioning that his shoe type, even though I don't necessarily care, it really does matter in how it's going to render the image, because it will make more like a portrait picture and you won't get the full body. He is wielding, no, we want a staff or something, maybe a wand. He is wielding a small magic wand with gray magic emitting from the wand. So we're just kind of defining how we want the image. He doesn't have a horrific black helm. And what we'll say is the background is I'll say a stone wizard's tower or something like that, just to kind of give it some background. I'm not going to be too picky about it. If you make this too long or too detailed, sometimes it doesn't give you what you want anyways. And then the big thing is like tenebrous, which means dark. So hopefully that'll kind of loosely kind of translate into the mood of the lighting. And then this 35mm low angle camera shot will help get us that full body shot. Otherwise, it'll do some weird poses sometimes. And then I'm going to leave it on auto because I don't want to necessarily make it realistic. I'll have to see what it does. The aspect ratio, now this is kind of important. So if it's a tall, kind of thin, or like maybe a giant or something, you might want to use 9/16. So that's this particular orientation. Or if it's something squat like a dwarf or maybe a halfling or something wide and girthy, maybe the barbarian, you might want to use 1:1, which is going to capture more of the weaponry. So what I'm going to say is he's wielding a small magic wand with gray magic emitting from the wand. So it shouldn't take too much room. So if you say like a battle axe or a warhammer, if he's holding it sideways, that's going to make the image wider and will often cut off the weapon. So if you're going to use a weapon that's tall like that, like a long sword or something, you may want to say that he's like leaning on it, or he has it kind of standing upright. Otherwise, when it renders the photo, if it's anything that goes horizontal, it will cut off the edges of it. So in that case, you'd probably want to use a square. So we'll see what happens with this particular thing. So a full body length digital fantasy illustration of a strange, mysterious, and powerful wizard with a pointy nose. I want him to kind of have a big hawk nose, kind of. He has dark gray hooded arc. I'd say he is wearing dark gray hooded. I'll say he is wearing a hooded. No, he's wearing dark gray hooded arcane robes, a black cape, and black leather boots. The background, okay, I want to say that he is standing on ancient stonework. That way we make sure that the feet are rendered, because sometimes even with adding shoes, it'll only show like the top of the shoe. So you got to kind of fight with AI tools. And then if you say fantasy sometimes, it'll give them elf ears even though you didn't ask for it. So it's kind of a weird thing that was in the beginning. Probably the training data that they used long ago was based off of fantasy, and it's probably like World of Warcraft images and stuff like that. So who knows? But anyways, these settings here will help set up what I'm going to be doing with it. And there's advanced things. So if there's things you want to avoid, I want to put that in here. But in this case, I'm not too worried. Let's see what happens. So we'll go ahead and grab this and see what it's going to generate. And as it's doing so, I'm going to be using some tools that you may or may not be familiar with. So we're going to make the full color image. We're going to make the portrait. We're going to make the token, and we're going to make the full body image for the 2.5 3D mode. So this isn't too bad. I like that they kind of made his nose look kind of distorted, but as you can see, the cape is kind of cut off here. This is kind of what I was saying for perspective. You might want to change the orientation. So I might try the other instead of this. This isn't too bad because it's not cut off a lot. But if you want to avoid that, you got to kind of think about his pose and such. So I will use this. I'll use the same prompt, but I'll just adjust it slightly. And maybe instead of going with the, so let me click on prompt. I'll just kind of go for something else. So I'll say he is holding a small magic wand. Okay, and then I will change it to 1 by 1, so that'd be the square. So this is where a lot of the AI tools kind of fall down. So if you don't give it a good description and you give it too much background, it's going to try to force everything into this small area, and that's why you get this stuff cut off. Like you might only get the top half or whatever. So that's why I mentioned his boots and the fact that he's standing on ancient stonework, because that is something that you'll fight. See, here we go. So now we got everything in the picture. I don't mind this. Actually, this looks pretty cool. So what I would do with this is go ahead and take this, and then if you're happy with the image, or maybe you want to edit something, you can do that in here. But in this case, I'm just going to favorite it or like it, so I can come back to it if I need to. You can go and open this up and change things in it with the canvas option. I'm not going to go into that today, but you can do a little bit more finer details if you want. I like that he's wearing black fingernail polish. That's kind of cool. And now what I'm going to do is take and you can also upscale this. So if I click on upscale, that's going to make this a lot more higher quality. And then I will bump the detail up just a slight amount, maybe up to 60%. That'll kind of help it kind of get rid of some of that fuzziness. Right now, it kind of has that illustration look, which I kind of like. I don't mind that sometimes. But other cases, you might want it to look a little bit nicer. So if you're going to be using this for like a book or some sort of module that you're creating, maybe you want to use a higher quality image. So we'll see how this turns out, if it makes any difference. Oh yeah, I can already tell. So what you do with this split view is, so from there's the old one and there's the new one. So that really did make quite a difference. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do with that is click on these little dots here, and I'm going to download, and you can do PNG or JPEG. So I'm going to do the PNG version. And that should give me a decent high quality image. And the trick to these sometimes is to go in and actually name it, because right now this thing doesn't have a title or a name. So I'm going to take this and go to, I'm going to say ART, and then we'll say human ILL illusionist, something like that. And then what will happen is when I go to look for it again, it'll be easier for me to find. So you want to get into the habit of naming these things. Do it right off the bat. Don't wait till the end, because it'll just get overwhelming, and then you'll have like a gazillion pieces of art that you're going to have to fix. Now what we're going to do with this is, now that I have the full image, I'm going to now ask it to cut out the background. So this is a really nice feature. Some tools do this, some don't. So it kind of depends on what you're paying for and what type of subscription you have and the type of AI tool. But see, this cut the feed off too much, so I may not want to use it that way. But it's nice because it'll cut out the background. So in most cases, this will be fine. I'm not too worried about this. This is just kind of a demonstration. But if you didn't want the feet cut out, you'd have to redo the prompt so that he's not standing on anything in particular. And maybe you would say he's facing the camera. But I'm just going to go ahead and go with it. I'm not too worried about these feet being cut off. But nonetheless, once you have that, you can start adding that stuff into a program such as this. This is or an application online. This is RollAdvantage Token Stamp. So if I go back to the artwork that I just made, and I come in here, I'm going to drag this image, if it's still the full image. Yeah, so take that, drag and drop it here. And then what I'll do is stretch this out to make the portrait. So this is just going to be the image that goes on the character sheet. That is just for his face, essentially, and his head, maybe part of his shoulders. And then I'll download this, and this will be entitled, I'll rename this to Portrait. And this is going to be 256 by 256. That's the default dimensions that this particular app does. And that's kind of perfect for Fantasy Grounds. You don't need a huge picture for a little tiny box in Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to go ahead and hit download. And if you wanted to put a custom border on it, you can. But Fantasy Grounds already provides a border for Portrait, so I don't add one on there, because it'll double up on your border. So that's why I don't use it. And now for this thing here, I might want to download this too, because this is the cutout version. So I'll just go ahead and hit download. So this will have the PNG file without the background. And that's kind of what the steps you would go through. Now I'm going to also think about creating a token. So if I create just kind of put a border around it, and then I'll adjust the size again. So I want to maybe take this image and just make it a tad bit smaller. And then what I'll do is go ahead and download this token. I might want to change the border color. So right now it's kind of that beige color. I kind of want like a purplish, kind of a gray. There we go. So that kind of matches with his personality a little bit better, I think, instead of that beige color. And then I'll download that. So there's a couple different downloads there, and I want to make sure that I title those and that I actually make those to where they're not going to be confusing when I go to look at that again. So if I go back to my artwork here, I'm going to say this is the, I'll just say 3D _ human _ illusionist. So I don't want to lose that. And then this will be, we'll say PRT, portrait, human illusionist. And this is an important step, because if you don't do this, when you go to put all this stuff in Fantasy Grounds, it's going to drive you bananas. And if you do a whole bunch of them and then try to go back and fix it, that's not good. That's something that's going to, plague you the whole time. So you want to make sure that you rename these and make, that's really an important step. And maybe make a folder. So I'll go ahead and make a new folder. That way I can organize it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder. And this is the folder that I'm going to drag into Fantasy Grounds when I'm done. I kind of have to sort out some of it, but I'm going to sort that once I get into Fantasy Grounds. So if I go to, let's see, I want to go to Show More Options, and I want a new folder. So open, let's just create new folder. Create shortcut. Interesting. Anyways, I don't know why that's such a challenge, but let's see. So show more options. Here we go. Customize this folder, new folder. Here we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put character art, because that's basically what these are. And then I'm going to take all of the artwork for right now and stick those in here. And I think I need to rename this. So this is going to be TKN, so I know it's a token. And then this will be human underscore illusionist. And I'm doing that so that I have identifiers, and I'm going to consistently name everything after that so that if it goes into the Fantasy Grounds subdirectories, I'll be able to sort it out, and I'll have my own search term. So if I do PRT, I know that's going to be a portrait, or ART is going to be the full artwork, or 3D is going to be the stand-up 3D asset. So I'll start dragging these images in the new folder, I guess, if that's what it's going to remain. Okay. There we go. So this is just kind of one out of many that I would probably create for character art, depending on how much time and effort you want to put into it. But if you're going to run a campaign, you're going to need at least 6 of them, or maybe a few more, just so there's options. But I would do at least 4 for your group, depending on the group size. So what I would do with this is, keep all this stuff in here for the originals, and I'm going to copy all of this stuff here and put it in a Fantasy Grounds. So when I go into Fantasy Grounds, I'm going to minimize that. And here are my notes. So this is going to be setting up the characters for the artwork and all that good stuff. But I want to put it in Fantasy Grounds first. So if I go into the assets and go to images, and now that'll be per campaign. So this is in this particular campaign. Go to folder, and then I'm just going to paste those in there. So the only thing I'm going to move out of here is the token and the portrait. These 2 images are going to stay, but these 2 got to go in separate folders. So those are going into the images folder. And then what you can do is hit refresh assets, and it will create a folder called campaign. But it's not going to stay like this forever, because I'm going to go to the portraits and go to folder and actually go back to, I want to do the tokens first, and go to folder. Now this is going to be the tokens. So I'm just going to hit Control V. So I'll leave that token image in there. And then the portrait image, I'm going to actually go into the directory here and make a new folder. So new folder, and then this is going to be portraits. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste that other one here. So they go in different spots, even though it's all for one character. And whenever you move files around, or you rename them, or you end up moving them back and forth, you want to hit this refresh, and that will ensure that Fantasy Grounds recognizes the changes and it takes in the data that you've changed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and make the 3D portrait for this particular NPC or player. So this is the Fantasy Grounds metadata builder tool. So Fantasy Grounds Image Metadata Builder. So I'll have the link for that, but it's on the Fantasy Grounds forums. And there's a little video that shows you how to do it. And then there's a downloads for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And it's basically, there's a walkthrough here. I've done videos on how to use this tool, but essentially you're going to be setting up and defining the scale of this thing in Fantasy Grounds. So when you're using the 3D assets, you'll get a better idea of what it's going to do, and it'll help define the center, the height, and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is go back into the metadata tool, and let's just say I got a bunch of these things. I don't have a bunch right now, but what I'm going to do is take the 3D art, drop that in there, and then there we're going to define the height and all that. So we're going to set the measurement. So we might come up here to the top and just kind of reach out over here on this corner. So that'll define this in space. And then we want to do the bottom right corner. So come out to about so, around where this cape is, and click down here. So that sets the X and the Y. And now to set the height in token height in grid. So this is going to be roughly about 5 feet. So one block essentially. And then if you want to do width or height, so in height, I might say it's 5.7. This guy's like 5'7" or something like that. So maybe 5'6". He's not very tall and he's kind of squat. So, he's kind of, he's stooped down. So maybe even 5'5". And then for the center, you got to set the center X and Y between here. So you set the center. You kind of divide the image in half and, average between these two. So maybe right about here would be center for this token. And then you hit Save XML. And what it does is it saves a definition file in the same folder that you were editing from. So in this case, here is the offsets for the image. So this will help define what it's going to look like in the 3-dimensional mode. So that's the steps involved for making character art if you want a full set. So I'm thinking about putting these up for like $5 or something, doing a whole series of different classes just so people have some starting stuff and then they can go make their own. But I don't see anything like this yet on the Forge. There's nothing complete. It's like you either get all the tokens, the top-down 3D ones, or you get these pogs. And there's nothing wrong with these, but then you don't have anything matching those. Like you don't have the full body art and that sort of thing. So I'm trying to get it to where I would have the entire set for one character. And that takes a long time because essentially you're dealing with 4 different images. So let's go back to Fantasy Grounds and let's see what's going on there. So we'll take and start assigning those images to a character. So I'm just going to make kind of a dummy character, just add this just so I can see what's going on, and then open this up. So here's where these different images would come in handy. So if I go to Assets, the first thing I want to do is add the portrait image, which is basically the portrait. So what we'll do is we'll go into Campaign, or actually we'll go to Portraits and go to Campaign, and then here's the portrait that we're going to use. Now, if you don't already have a token, it will default, so you won't necessarily need to create a third POG, but I also like to include the round token in case the people don't want square ones. So if I go to Tokens and go to Campaign, I can sub that out for this. So this is the round token. Yep. So that's that. And then for the camera token, that's the 3D one. So that would be in Images, and this is the 3D one. So that's basically, you need at least 2 pieces of art, but I included more than one. I got the actual POG too. So I would probably just use, for the actual character itself, I would probably just use the actual portrait image and let that default as the token. But I would also provide, a way for people to use, the POG token as well. So that way it'd be a separate folder with the round tokens in case that's all they want. So you would provide them with all images so that they have it. Now what you want to do is check out a map and kind of see how the token, the 3D is going to look. So in Fantasy Grounds, if you're new or you don't have a lot of content yet, you can go ahead and add a map pack that comes with Fantasy Grounds. So if I go to Modules, right now I just have kind of these D&D kind of books loaded, rule books. Not really a whole lot of maps in these, I believe. I think there is one in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I'm just going to go off of the Fantasy Grounds one. So go to Activation, and you go to FG Battle Maps, and that's a free module that you can load. It's good for testing and that sort of thing. And then in the Images and Maps, you might use, maybe we'll use Battle Map Cave or something like that. We'll just use this for example. and I want to see, make sure it has line of sight. I'm pretty sure it does. Yeah, so line of sight's already on it. And I'm going to drag and drop this character onto the combat tracker just to test things out, and then drag and drop it onto the map. So there is the character token. And then what I want to do is I'm going to turn on lighting maybe. No, I don't need to do that. Now I'm just going to go to the camera mode and see what it looks like. Yeah, so it didn't scale properly. I don't know if it's something I did wrong, but it should have been more like this. I think it's because of how I set up the parameters on it. But this is the kind of what you're looking for. I don't think it was defined very well. I might have to go back and fix that. But nonetheless, this is kind of what I was going for. It didn't scale the way I wanted it to, but at least you got an idea of what you have to do in order to make your character art. So matching token, matching portrait, and matching camera view. So that's something that you're not going to see very often in the current paradigm that we have for Fantasy Grounds, because on the Forge and even in adventure modules, they don't have this 3D art here. So that's something that you may come across when you're playing. You know, it might drive you nuts or you may not care, but nonetheless, this is just going to give you an idea of what you're up against. Yeah, so let me give him a torch. Let's go with the effects, and we're going to we'll give him a candle. Let's see, he's kind of going around in a candle. There we go. So now he has a candle here that he can use. Yep. So candle. So anyways, you get the idea. So I just made a character, added the additional art. So matching token, matching portrait, matching 3D or 2D art, and then assigned them to the character. So what I'm thinking about doing, I don't know if you guys are interested in that, but I'm thinking about making a set of these based off of whatever archetypes. So I might make a few wizards, a few rogues, you know, just to have a little bit of variation. The tough part about character artwork is that everyone has a unique character. So no matter how many I make, someone's not going to be satisfied. So I would just probably make, you know, a couple of each variation. And if they didn't like it, they'll have to make their own. But at least it'd have a starting point. So if you were going to, start making some pre-gens, you already have something in here. And then that way it will be accessible when you're playing and you don't have a bunch of mismatched artwork. It kind of drives me nuts that you only have a portrait and a flat token, but no 3D ones. You can use some of the ones that are included in Fantasy Grounds, but they don't match really. You might have a rogue or something, but it doesn't really match these two pieces of art, or vice versa. So that is something that is, that's just something you have to work through. So I might make some and put them on the Forge. Maybe do, a couple dozen of each or something like that, or maybe 6 of each, and then just put them in groups on here, maybe by class instead of all grouped together. So that's what I think I'm going to work on as in the winter here, as we get into the colder months, is start doing those. I don't know if it would be useful or if anyone would care, but I'll give it a shot. I'll try one pack, like a generic one, and then go from there. Because I was thinking about taking, like I made some earlier yesterday, and they turned out really good. And I want to be able to, like, these are more, like NPCs for, like champions and bad guys and things like that. So I was thinking about doing a pack like this and see how this one does, and then do like a character facing one. So this would be like bosses and bad guys, like the final enemy or whatever. These could also be player character tokens if you wanted them to be, but these would be more generic kind of random stuff. I like this because sometimes when you get packs that are all one type, it makes it more organized, but then they start all looking the same. So I don't know. I'm just kind of iffy on that, but these turned out pretty good. And I do have the tokens made up for them and such. So maybe I'll release these as like a free demo pack or something. I don't know. But anyhow, if you guys are interested, drop me a message in the description of the video on YouTube. And I also have all the links for the tools that I use. So the token stamp tool, the 3D metadata builder, this is free, and this is on the Fantasy Grounds forums. And then the AI tool I used was ideogram.ai, and that will cut out the background stuff. So, and it is a paid subscription that I have. You can make free stuff, but it's kind of limited, like most. But this one works pretty good because I like how cleanly it can cut out the background. It's very smooth and clean. You don't have to deal with all that work, because when I was doing them before, I was taking the background out myself, and it was a lot of work. This one just does it like in a second, and 99% of the time it does a good job. So anyhow, hopefully that's helpful a little. At least they'll give you an idea of what you're up against, and hopefully the assets will do well on there. I don't care about necessarily making a bunch of money. I just want people to have options when they're playing characters to have the character art. So you guys take care. Enjoy the rest of your week, and getting closer to Friday. I guess today's hump day. So